Hello, good evening from central London, and I'm excited to be back on this Wednesday. A lot happening, of course, but today specifically we are talking about landlords in a rush to sell before Christmas ahead of the stamp duty land tax increase, of course, that we've had that budget announced and introduced from the Labour Party. Now, we knew this was going to have some unintended consequences throughout the market, rental market, sales, people buying, selling. But specifically today, we're going to be diving into those numbers and to see how it's impacted, at least in the short term, and see if people want to get ahead of that 2025 stamp duty increase. Now, we're specifically going to be looking at buy-to-let. We'll touch upon very briefly on those first-time buyers, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with, they make up the largest proportion of buyers this year alone. And of course, that's due to the mortgage rates reducing to a 2-year low. Which I say that, and yet, anyone would think, well, how low have they been? Have they come to? But the reality is, where they were so high, right now is certainly better than what we've seen in the course of the last 18 months. Now, inflation, there's going to be an impact there now because of that budget that has been introduced by Labour, but also, most importantly, the inflation, the rate at which the Bank of England was planning to cut is also going to have an impact, and of course has unintended consequences for those people who have mortgages or going to want to review their mortgages in the next year or two. Okay, great. So listen, as always, we're going to get the due diligence and technology out the way. I want to make sure that you can hear me and see me. So I can see Andrew. Hey, Andrew, very good to see you online. And again, we're just doing some house work here, sort of cleaning up, making sure that everyone can hear. Okay, amazing. That's great to know. Thank you so much. So listen, guys, anyone jumping in right now, we're across sort of different platforms here, I believe YouTube and other ones, other social media. The way we like to do this is keep it interactive. So if you have any question, guys, just put it on the chat and I'll be sure to come back and review it with you. If you've missed anything, I do have my very good assistant with me who gives me a prompt. So just give me a shout. So first of all, I'm going to make sure all my communication is up to date here, including this other form of communication. I've got that up and I believe I'm all good to go. Anyone in London town, give me a shout as well. We'll be trying to talk a little bit on London because I know that we have quite a big following when it comes to the city of London, and happy to share some more information. Okay, guys, so without further ado, let's make sure that we share one of the articles here that shares a little bit more insight as to what's happening with landlords selling up before 2025. And this article is, of course, by 118, Property 118, and it reads, landlords rush to sell before Christmas ahead of the stamp duty land tax increase. So what we have here, it seems that it's one step forward and 2 steps back for landlords. And that is true because there was confidence, there was cautious optimism in the market. And although landlords have gone through a fair amount, I have shared before last week that right now landlords are showing profits. They've been more profitable now than what they've been over the course of the last 2 years, which of course has been something positive that landlords have been looking towards. And those mortgages that they were able to secure as well seem to be kind of, making those numbers work once again. But now we've had this budget introducing a significant changes to the stamp duty, of course, and it's going to take in full effect in April 2025. We know that it's already been introduced to an extent immediately, and we'll talk about who that's impacting specifically and how it's impacting the housing market. So the changes have caused panic amongst landlords with a spike in numbers looking to sell before Christmas. Currently, stamp duty land tax threshold is £250,000 for all buyers and £425,000 for first-time buyers. However, from the 1st of April 2025, these thresholds will revert to the previous levels of What else do we have? What does this mean for landlords? This change means that selling properties in 2025 could become more costly. Now, what does that even mean? This tax, of course, is for buyers. What do you mean that it's going to become more costly to sell properties? So surely, my tax as a seller hasn't increased. So why would it become more expensive for me to sell property? Well, the reality is whenever these things has an impact on the other side, when it comes to the buyers, they are going to want to factor that in. And so it's going to naturally have an impact on any sellers at the moment. And especially if those are the type of properties that buy-to-let landlords are going to be buying, they are going to factor that into on the numbers, having, of course, an indirect impact to those sellers. So the higher the stamp duty land tax rates for additional properties are 5% above the standard residential rate. And that's 5% for now. Stamp duty, as we're going to see, and we'll share with you, is going to bump up to 7% depending on what price band you're going to be in. So this increase may lead to reduced sale prices as buyers factor in the higher tax liability. Now, let's not forget, guys, in most cases, especially if it's a buy-to-let property, this is not an emotional buy. This is very much a numbers game and something that makes sense with the numbers. Buyers out there, especially in the buy-to-let, will be factoring this in. And it'll be interesting to see what prices will start doing as we hit that 2025 April. So additionally, recent changes have made tenant evictions ever more challenging, limiting landlords' options when selling occupied properties. Landlords and landlord sales is one solution, as new owner can inherit the existing tenancy. So I'll repeat that. Landlord to landlord sales is one solution, as the new owner can inherit the existing tenancy. However, put bluntly, if you were a landlord contemplating selling or are in any financial distress, now's the time to act. And I would agree with this, to be honest with you. As we come into the following year, 2025, what we do know is that Section 21 is going out the window. Okay, that is a fact. It's not a if, it's a when. Now, I say a lot of landlords were clinging on to the fact that when the Conservatives were going to do this, and they were going to do this as well, by the way, they were going to be more sensible in the fact that they're going to make sure that the courts were up to date. Labour doesn't seem to be giving a damn about that, and they will be proceeding with this head on. Section 21 is coming out the window. So what we do know is that eviction for tenants, should you have a tenant and you were to secure a year on the property, it's going to be much more challenging to get a tenant out as we come into 2025 and those laws are implemented. So from that perspective, it's probably going to be better for you to sell if you are planning to sell sort of anywhere within the next 12 or 24 months. I would certainly be selling right now. And also knowing that that impact of the increase of stamp duty is going to have an impact on my sales price. So I've got two things. One, I probably can't ask my tenant to leave anymore. And number two, it's going to have an impact on my price. So again, guys, I know a lot of landlords are staying in the market. Those numbers work for them. Property continues to be a long-term wealth building mechanism, and it works absolutely fine, especially when we compare them to other assets. It's something that makes sense to them. It's tangible, and it's something that they can pass on to the children. But for many people, it may not be, and that's understandable. But probably right now would be the best time to sell. And we are seeing this in the articles that we're going to be reviewing today. So let's go back to the article. So by selling now, landlords can benefit from the current tax thresholds and our more favorable market environment. Whilst there are many options to sell your buy-to-let portfolio properties, time is of the essence, and it's never been more relevant to factor it in now. This week, this article goes on to talking about landlords that they've spoken to and sort of different emotions or outcomes that they want on that. So listen, guys, before I jump into these other articles, I want to review and see what questions you have, okay? Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be with this topic. It could be somewhat relative to this. But we got a question here from Edmund. And Edmund, Danny, would it be possible for you to explain if stamp duty change going to cost me if I sell after April 2025? Well, listen, and I guess it depends also whether the market that you're in, whether it be geographically or demographically, appeals more to first-time buyers or buy-to-let investors. But as we're going to see, actually, this is going something that's going to impact both. So it depends on price band. It depends on the property and who it appeals to as well. But I would say, in general, yes, it will impact the price of your property, in my opinion. At the moment, we know what we know, which is the mortgage costs are relatively lower than what they were sort of a year and a half ago. We all thought that those rates were going down, and they do seem to going to continue to go down, but not at the speed as we thought it was, because obviously the budget has brought something across. It's interesting. I was actually talking to someone a couple of days ago, and she said to me, she doesn't work in the property industry, but she buys, she sells, and has some buy to let investments. And she said to me, Danny, it feels like people are always waiting for something, or it feels like there's always an impact on something that is coming our way. She said, I remember it was, Brexit was coming up and we're waiting for the vote, and everyone wanted to wait to see what was happening with Brexit. Brexit happened, and it wasn't the result that a lot of people wanted. And it was like, okay, guys, we need to see what kind of impact Brexit is going to have. And then we had the fiasco with Liz Truss, which had some major issues. I can't even remember if this was just after COVID or just before. I think it was just after. But we had COVID, the Liz Truss fiasco. We've had God knows how many prime ministers. I mean, I'm going to try and count this. So it was Boris Johnson, sort of Theresa May, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. I mean, it's just been a chaos. And so people were seeing what was going to happen with that turmoil. Of course, recession came as well. We had those mortgages sort of go through the roof. And then, of course, we have a Labour government in place, and now this budget. And see, people seem to be waiting more and more. But that's just what we're seeing at the moment. So to answer your question, absolutely, it will have an impact on your selling price if that's what you intended to do. I think it would be sensible, if you are intended to sell within the next 12 to 24 months, I would be probably putting my property on the market right now, if that's right for you, Edmund. Because to be honest with you, a lot of landlords are staying put. Property still works, and it still works as a mechanism for long-term wealth. Speak to a tax advisor. Don't listen to all the scaremongering that's happening at the moment. I have plenty of landlords that are staying in the market and increasing, expanding their portfolio. And it might well be that you don't decide to sell, and in fact decide to buy and make the most of the current market. There are a lot of sellers, a lot of landlords that are deciding to sell. So I think it is the time where the buyers are expecting discounts right now because of the extra properties, or you think they are holding back. I definitely think, based on the article that we've seen, and we're going to be looking at another article actually, you know what, as we're on that topic, let's review that in real numbers. So to answer your question, Stephen James, here is a article by the Property Reporter. Property market picks up pace following the budget. So we do know that there is an impact on landlords who are wanting to sell, right? We just saw that article. Now let's look at the overall market. So we've got 84,000 more homes have come onto the market following last month's autumn statement, according to newly released data from Yopa. So again, this isn't just purely based on buy-to-let or chain-free properties. This is the overall market. So new research from Yopa has highlighted that in the last 2 weeks, since the autumn budget, 84,000 more homes have come to the market, an increase of 11.4%. Yopa analyzed current for sale stock listing across Britain, looking at how many of these have hit the market in the last 2 weeks since autumn budget. Now, the level of the market activity differs by each area of the nation. Now, the research shows that there are currently some 823,000 homes listed for sale across Britain, and 84,000 of those, again, 84,000 of those have entered the market since autumn budget alone, a boost of 11.4% in the number of sellers choosing to make their move. Every region of Britain and every major city analysed by Yopa has seen an increase in for sale stock since the autumn budget. Regionally, the largest increase has been seen across Scotland at 12.7%, with North East and London at 12%, also seeing some of the largest increases in for sale stock. And I find this interesting. Because if you've been following my my channel, and especially our live streams, what we do know is in the north, what we do see is a lot of limited companies being set. Well, actually, that's not accurate. In the south, a lot of limited companies being set up to buy properties, but we see a large percentage of the purchases of properties, even though it's been those limited companies have been opened in the south. A lot of those purchases are happening in the north. But what's interesting to see is the reverse of that is also true. There's also a good amount of sellers selling up out there. The question is, how many of those sellers in the north are actually buy to let landlords or investors wanting to exit the market? So as you can see, when you talk about the northeast and you talk about London, it's pretty much the same, 12%. Also seeing some of the largest increase for sale stocks. Now, Wales has seen the smallest influx of new homes listed for sale, although there has still been 9.5% increase in the last 2 weeks alone. Of the 15 major cities analysed by Yopa, Glasgow has seen the biggest increase at 13%, followed by Nottingham, Edinburgh, and Brighton. Now, Brighton doesn't surprise me, and it will be interesting to find out what's happening in Brighton in terms of prices. Anyone in Brighton, give me a shout. But I'd like to share something with Brighton. Prices just became so ridiculously expensive during the COVID era, where people were buying properties like hotcakes out there. It was selling like hotcakes. And I think there was a real price inflation there, which right now the numbers just simply don't make sense with those price tags that Brighton has. Okay, so before I move on, I have a few questions here which I'd like to pick up. Before I do that, let's see where we were here. Let's finish up this article so we could go on to the questions. So, based on this, and Edinburgh and Scotland up north, it doesn't surprise me either. We've seen a government just all across Great Britain, by the way, that hasn't been very landlord friendly. But I know landlords up north who have been particularly unhappy with the government, have decided to get up and sell. So there's always a sense of uncertainty in the run-up of major budget, and so hardly surprising that many home sellers have been sitting on the fence to see just what Chancellor Rachel Reeves had set up her sleeve. Now, the answer was unfortunately not a great deal, and now the autumn budget is done, and thus we've seen a significant increase in the number of sellers entering the market. So I guess this let's finish this up. So this is a smart move given the fact that there was no extension to current stamp duty relief thresholds granted, that, and we're now likely to see an uptick in demand over the coming weeks as home buyers look to purchase ahead of next year's 31st of March deadline. So I guess there's two things happening from that article. Number one, it's saying, yes, there will be a rush for people to sell, given that stamp duty is no longer there. But the fact that they're selling is not particularly because of any changes to the budget. It's because they were just on the fence and wanted to see what outcome that budget brought them specifically as an impact for them. And the truth is there was no impact to them. So they thought, okay, crap, well, I'm just going to sell now, but then I need to sell quickly because, in fact, it's going to have an impact on the price that I sell out for after April 2025. So I have a question. I hope that helps in terms of your question, Stephen James. That was purely for you. And what else do we have here? So what's the best way to make sure I can get a fair price if I decide to sell soon? That is a great question, Andrew. Well, listen, The way you get the best price for a property for sale, there are many factors, but of course, choosing the right agent is going to be the first and foremost. Okay. Now, one thing that we do is we have a solid network of agents out there. So if you want any recommendations or guidance, a professional agent anywhere in the UK, make sure you complete the link. There's a link on the description, at least there should be. There should be a link on the description whereby you can actually just fill out a very simple form and you have the information of all the best agents. So that's number one. But when you look to sell a property, Andrew, there's three main factors. So one is going to be presentation, how the property looks, of course, whether it's online, a magazine, a brochure, whatever that may be. Of course, it looks amazing. Number two, exposure. You can have the best looking property, but if it's not exposed, if it's not put in front of the right buyers, then it doesn't really matter. It means absolutely nothing at all. So presentation, exposure. But here's an important one, and this is where you have most control as a seller, and that is price. You can't be overpriced because it have a huge impact overall at the end of the process. You have a real issue with your price and what you end up with. The last thing you want to do, and there is an interesting video actually coming out on Saturday. It's more towards letting agents rather than a estate agency. If you're not subscribed, make sure you do so you can get a prompt on that. And it's talking about the tactics, the awful tactics that some agents use to win your business and to let property. But the same principle applies with letting and sales. So pricing it right at the very beginning. The last thing that you want to do is have a property that's just lagging and just on the market. Everyone can see it. It's on the market for 2-3 months, and then eventually you have to reduce the price. And what buyers start to see is, I saw this property, it's been on the market 3 months, price is now reduced. People still don't want to see it, or if they go look at it, they think there's something wrong with it, and that's where you start getting into problems. That's not a situation you want to be in, believe me, Andrew. So I hope that helps. The right agent, presentation, exposure, and of course, price. So here we have Sonia. If I decide to keep my property, are there ways to make it more affordable with these changes coming up? The best way I can help you with that would be to speak to a tax expert. Shoot me a message, Sonia, and be happy to put you in touch. Just fill out the same form of the agency recommendations or referral, and just after the tax expert, happy to point you in the right way. That's really, right now, that is the best thing you can do. And of course, maximizing your rental with the best possible agent. So yes, that's the best way you can make it more affordable. And then we have another question here by Kaylee. I'm not sure at this time, what are the other landlords doing right now? Are they selling up or reinvesting somewhere else? Here in London, I would say what they're doing is they're diversifying, Kaylee. A lot of landlords diversifying, at least those professional landlords, those landlords who perhaps just have one property. I would say probably some of those landlords, at least if they're not pensioners, they are deciding to pack up and leave. That's at least the trend that I'm seeing. But if there's the pensioner and they only have one property, they're actually keeping it. And for those landlords who have 3 or 4 properties, they are actually deciding to scale up and expand, because usually that type of landlord has their properties held within a structure of a limited company. And the only way they could continue to make it viable is to be able to scale up and buy more properties. And those are the landlords, at least here in the capital, that I speak to the day-to-day basis. They are diversifying and dabbling in buying a few properties up north, but they're still retaining properties in London and looking for good deals. And if you are a landlord like that, looking for a good deal, whether it's in the capital somewhere else, you're in the right place at the right time. So I know we have a few more other questions there, but I do want to look at this other article, which is, have you actually seen house price edge to record high as Bank of England mules a rate cut? So guys, if you just jumped in, we have looked at a few of the articles, especially the one relating to landlords who rush to sell before Christmas ahead of the stamp duty and land tax. And this is, of course, down to let me see here. This is due to making sure that they can make the most of the price of the property before stamp duty comes into full force in April. So if we look at this, the 7th of November value surpassed previous peak of June 2022. Average house prices rise by 0.2% in October. Annual price inflation 3.9, and typical home is now worth 293. House prices. So this is just talking about the overall house price. It's the 4th consecutive monthly increase and takes average property values to a record high of £293,000. But let's look at this. On an annual basis, house values are up by 3.9%, down slightly by 4.6%, record in September. The news comes as the Bank of England is set to decide on interest rates. Now, of course, this was a few days back. Okay. One thing I wanted to show you guys is that impact of stamp duty in real terms, in real numbers. And this is a great article we have here where we can see this. And this is the one here. And this is for buy-to-let investors. I shared, I think, something like this last week. So for those who've missed it, I think this is a great opportunity. Let me zoom in on this. Okay. This is being recorded, by the way. So if you miss it, you can always sort of go back on it. So if we look at here, for additional dwellings, this is for additional dwellings. If we look at up to £125,000, I'm not sure where in the country you can actually buy a property for 125, but okay. 3%, this was before October last month. Now, right now, that's going to cost you 5%. And then in April 2025, 5%. This is the interesting one, guys. If you are looking to buy a property between 125,000 and 250,000, this is the real increase here. Almost double if you look at from 3% before October this year. And if you look at after April, 7%. Right now, it's 5%. So you could say here it's gone up 2%. On a property of 250,000 pounds, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not something that's going to put you off on buying a property if you're planning on buying a buy-to-let property at 5%. 2% more, okay, you can digest it. What could that be? An extra £3,000? However, you're now looking at almost double in April at 7%. Now, that's painful. And I do know a lot of landlords, unfortunately, that had a property that they were purchasing, had it in the pipeline, and this impacted them especially on the higher end. So as you can see, 3, 5, 7, those are big numbers. Now, when it comes to properties over 250,000, there's really no difference between now and April. When you look at the 250,000 up here, 8% right now, 10 and 10. However, let's look at the difference between 500,000 for an investor, main resident, and first-time buyer. So for an investor, £500,000 property right now would be £37,500. Now that's going to go up in April. It'll go up to £40,000. Again, a property of this value, £2,500, is it going to make much of a difference? Are you going to be sort of rushing through to save £2,500? Not particularly. But here's the thing. Labour, who say they protect, obviously, the working person, and they're trying to make this as painful as possible for investors. Look at this. For main residents, £12,500 right now, £15,000 after April. But then if we look at here, £5,000 for first-time buyers, they're the ones that are going to be the most affected. 3,750 now and 10 grand after April. So this is where the buyers are going to be in a rush. Now, if you're a first-time buyer, £6,500, give or take, that's quite a fair amount of money, especially for those buyers at that value. A lot of them, they're looking at mum and dad bank because they can't even afford it themselves. Now they have to find an extra £6,500 because Labour has introduced this. So again, there are different segments of the market that are going to be more affected by April than others. Some, it's like, whatever, an extra £2,000, it is what it is. But for others, it does make a difference. And this is where we're seeing a rush in, title of the video, landlords rush to sell their properties ahead of the 2025 April. So I hope this has been helpful, guys. If you're just jumping in, we have reviewed a few articles so far. That does, of course, include this specific one, which was relating to landlords rushing and selling, and seeing that there's quite a few properties, chain-free properties, which will jump in, that are actually coming on the market, which of course tells us that indeed quite a fair amount of landlords are coming onto the market. Let me just have a look here. Yeah, so let's go on with some questions that we have here. Yes, I can definitely see the referral link. Okay, great, amazing. So we have any new ways to offset the taxes and capital gain tax that I know of. Run gun, I don't. I would say to speak to a tax expert, and it's certainly not my field, and it will be someone who certainly can help you with that. But in terms of taxes, the first thing I will say, if you're not holding your properties in a limited company, it might be worth restructuring. If you still want to stay in the property industry, perhaps sell off and then get into opening a limited company. Speak to a tax expert for sure. That would be my main advice. What are some creative ways that other landlords are finding that add value to their property in this market? I don't know if you mean add value in terms of sales, but we've already talked about presentation, exposure, and getting it at the right price. If you're talking about value in terms of maximizing on your return and keeping your property, there are several ways. Sort of, you could be pivoting, if you haven't done so, maybe a student accommodation, which potentially you could get more money for your property. Of course, looking at whether it needs refurbishment. We have quite a few people who have turned to short-term rental, which is being now very heavily regulated as well. It still makes sense. You just need to know to maneuver, and of course, whether you have a mortgage, if you have permission to be able to rent out the property that way. There's a lot of regulation. So my best answer to you would be go to the link and just book an appointment, and we'll be able to see if we can point you across the right way. I hope that helps Wise Property. We have Martin Pierce, and maybe it's an irrelevant question to the topic, Danny, but do you think green updates of energy efficient features would make my property more attractive to buyers right now? 100%, especially if they're buy-to-let investors. And let me read that again. Maybe it's irrelevant, but do you think green upgrades? Yes. Energy efficient? Absolutely. If you could bring your EPC to a much better standard, buy-to-let investors is the first thing they're looking at because they know what's coming their way. So if you have a property that's already sort of ready to go with the new standards that are set to come in 2030, your property is going to stand out amongst all the rest. So for sure, you are definitely thinking in the right path, my friend. Rungana, Crazy Rachel. I've not heard that one. Crazy Rachel, nice to help first time buyers or market. Yeah, Crazy Rachel. Yeah, good one. Run gun. So it's is there a shift in buyer interest towards specific property types like smaller units or more affordable properties? That's a great question. Let's dive into an article because I saw a article talking about that there was I believe more 2-bedroom units on the market in comparison to others, but I just need to dig that out somewhere where I saw. Yeah, so here's an article. Let's look at this. I think this was just before the actual budget itself. No, actually, it was after. So this is going to answer your question. So tax hit landlords quit the sector and change the market. So a third of homes for sale on Zoopla are currently chain free as landlords and second homeowners sell up ahead of still higher taxes. So again, this come out on the 7th of November. So from April 2025, council will be able to charge a premium of 100% up to 100% in additional council tax on second homes, a factor that second homeowners will be taken into account when making their selling purchase decisions. So, chain-free homes often complete faster than other properties, making them an attractive prospect for those hoping to finalize their property purchases. So again, a third of homes are actually on Zoopla are chain-free. Chain-free. So we're not even talking about properties that are previously on the market for rent. We're talking about they are chain-free. Chain-free homes often complete faster, as we said. Yes, we know that. And 1 week on from the budget, chain-free homes are attracting more interest compared to homes not advertised as chain-free, with listing views seeing an average increase of 9% and a 33% average increase in buyer inquiries. This interest is likely to increase further as homeowners and first-time buyers make last-minute offers in a bid to avoid the high stamp duty bill. Some 41% of two-bed homes, so this is the answer to your question. Some 41% of two-bed homes are currently listed as chain-free on Zoopla. Two-bed properties are often popular with older property buyers looking to downsize. So I'll repeat that. Some 41% excuse me, of two-bed homes are currently listed as chain-free. Two-bed properties are often popular with older buyers looking to downsize, as well as landlords and investors, so are more likely to be chain-free when they come onto the market than other types of homes. Now, there is some truth to this, but if you are a buy-to-let investor, one thing that I do typically see is buy-to-let investors will prefer, and of course it depends on budget, it depends on region, but they will prefer to buy one-bed units and spread kind of the risk and cost and buy two one-bed units rather than buy a two-bedroom property. That's been my experience at least. But of course, it depends on regions, and COVID has somewhat influenced and changed that dynamic where, more and more renters, perhaps, if they have the budget, will prefer to have the two-bedroom properties. Okay, so two-bed properties are often popular with older buyers. Okay, so the Northwest, Yorkshire and Humber and the Southwest have the highest proportion of chain-free homes at 36%, due in part to second home hotspots within these areas, such as Carsley and the Lake District and Bournemouth Coast. It is interesting because one thing I saw with these areas was also that it was also the areas that provided the best yields, if I'm not mistaken. So it's interesting to see that, how would I put this? That dance, let me put it that way, that dance between higher yields, buy to let investors buying in the areas as well, but also at the same time having the most amount of properties actually for sale that are chain free. It's an interesting dynamic that we see there. So Northwest 30 chain free properties. Northwest 36% has the highest, and as we start coming down sort of middle of the way, we can see 35% in the Southeast, and then right at the bottom we've got Scotland and London at 28% with chain-free properties, which is still a big number. I mean, I remember this. We were delivering this news probably a couple of weeks ago. We were saying that almost a third of properties in London were previously rented properties. Does this mean that buy-to-let is dead? No. It just means that the game has changed, and those who are wanting to continue to build wealth with property just need to make the tweaks and adjustments to continue to make it work. But does it work? Absolutely. I mean, you have those three fundamentals that still work, right? And that is, number one, it's that you have the tenant paying the actual mortgage, so they're paying the debt, number one. Number two, and of course depends whether you're interest only or whatever, number two, you get cash flow, and you should get cash flow immediately. Those numbers should work for you. And number three, of course, and this is where you win with property, is capital growth. Those fundamentals are still in place, and that you very rarely get with any other asset. So I hope that's making sense. So let's go back to this one here. So, Source Super, in the north of the country, Hull has a large proportion of homes for sale that are chain-free at 46.2%, the most common type being a two-bed home. In the south, London suburbs and towns within more affordable areas of the commuter belt tend to have an above average number of chain-free homes for sale, such as Uxbridge, and most common type of home being a three-bedroom property. Interesting. So you got more information here. Property most commonly marked chain-free, two-bedroom, and this, yeah. So you got Croydon, Luton, Bristol. This one's interesting. Always like Bristol, Luton, Bolton, and Croydon. So the proportion of homes available to buy without a chain-free tends to increase in final months of the year, peaking in January, the most popular time of the year to list a home for sale. Isabella Loic, a senior property researcher at Zupa, comments there are several reasons why home might be chain-free. Individuals may be selling inherited home. Households might be moving in together, going from two homes to one, or investors and second owners could be selling additional properties. Those looking to at buying a home before the stamp duty rate increase in April 2025 should think about buying a chain-free home, as they tend to complete much faster. So if you are looking to save money on the stamp duty, pretty much there's a tip for you. Look at those properties that are chain-free. That may help you get in there much quicker and complete before that stamp duty. I mean, can you even imagine the conveyancing? Those conveyances gonna be hectic, absolutely manic. With, of course, those buyers on the phone, sort of pushing that, moving that along. I mean, I know of one chap right now. He's in. I mean, this is nothing to do with stamp duty, but he started this process. I think it was back in. I think it was August. We're now in the 4th month. There I'm saying possibly even 5th month of going through a process of buying a property in a building, in a very prestigious part of London, a very beautiful building, and it's just dragged out because you have so many elements, especially here in the UK, where it's so complex and dated, to be honest with you, the process at least. So, guys, I hope that this is somewhat helpful for you all. And I have another question here from Leslie. How are homeowners handling maintenance and renovation costs with the goal of maximizing sales appeal? I guess that depends totally on the property itself. I mean, long gone are the days where you have a property that is in such a poor condition and you want to get away with getting maximum price on it. Those days are gone because there are properties out there that have been refurbished. One of the first things a lot of buy-to-let investors do once they purchase a property is they renovate it. And of course, that is your competition. So that's something that's going to be necessary. And in terms of how they're handling the maintenance and renovation costs, well, I guess, with a close eye on a budget, Leslie, I guess that would be my best answer to you. So, guys, if you're just joining, we've looked at several articles so far, of course, including that of the landlords rushing to sell before Christmas and what that looks like in terms of the stamp duty. We've also looked at the numbers when it comes to those properties and which properties are becoming more popular in terms of sales and regions and what type of size of property and so forth and so forth. This is being recorded, so if you did want to go back and review these articles, feel free to do so. Right now, I'm going to look at this one here, this other article, which is punitive property sector reacts to buy-to-let stamp duty hike. In the budget, Chancellor Rachel Reeves raised the stamp duty rate to investment properties 3 to 5%. Now, this just talks about a little bit about the reaction of a lot of property industry leaders out there. Swift and critical. So we got here by property president says we continue to see a growing disparity in the number of private rented sector rented homes available against the backdrop of increased demanding from tenants. Therefore, it's disappointing, of course, a property market very disappointed by the announcement and introduction of the budget. So Richard Donald, head of research at Insight Zoopla, says changes in stamp duty tax together with higher property prices has seen stamp duty raise over 11.5 billion. It's a tax that falls most heavily on buyers in southern England, with London and the southeast accounting for 50% of annual tax receipts from stamp duty. So here you are, Richard Donald saying that the south is the one that's going to suffer the most. And I guess a lot of people can relate to that, especially in London. And a lot of people asking, is buy-to-lets dead, especially when it comes to London? Now, are people really fleeing the capital, those who want to stay in property and going up north? I'm not necessarily seeing that. I do see a lot of investors diversifying, but certainly continuing to look at good deals here in London. The capital never fails. And I've never seen it. Until that happens, I'm going to stick to the capital. But of course, that diversification also exists. Second-hand buyers are already responding to last year's budget, which allows councils to charge double council tax for second homes. So here's another from Emma Cox Real Estate. And Shawbrook says the government should, of course, prioritize the needs of renters and buyers, but landlords will feel like they are once again bearing the brunt of punitive measures, with a further increase in stamp duty charge on additional homes coming into effect from tomorrow. The private rental sector has a key role to play in the UK housing, okay? And then we have Dominic Agaze, CEO of Winkworth. Stamp duty needs to be addressed. It stops people from buying homes to live in and prevents landlords from buying properties to let out, which hinders social mobility. And I need to agree there with Dominic. At the end of the day, people shouldn't be taxed to move. And the reality is this is a tax on people moving. And it's just not right. And I promise you, if you remove that tax tomorrow, the housing market activity will just go through the roof. I promise you, those numbers of people buying and selling, because a lot of people are just holding back. They don't want to pay that stamp duty. And then the government is complaining that there isn't enough housing stock on the market, because one of the biggest issues that we have, I don't care whether this is renting or people wanting to buy, the biggest challenge that we have in this country is supply. It's always been an issue of supply. And the government hasn't been able to deliver on the supply, but at the same time, whereby they can help sort of more activity in people sort of selling their property, whether it be landlords or homeowners, it will be on that tax, and it stops people from moving. That's just a fact. So totally agree there with Dominic Agaze. We are seeing high net worth individual already moving abroad, as tax on money earned elsewhere will be subject to inheritance tax here. This is significant amount of what makes London global centre will disappear, and that will be felt across the capital economy. Now, I know a lot of people who say, I don't give a damn. I don't live in London, and, so be it. But what they don't understand is that the capital is the engine that moves the country. Until that changes, we do need that. I'm not an economist. If you disagree with me, feel free to leave me a comment. Feel free to jump on this live stream. We're now going to start taking guests, as in from next week. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you do, so you can actually get this prompt and find out a debate right here on the live stream. So Nick Leeming, chairman of Jackson Stops, says today's budget misses a key opportunity for broader stamp duty reform, a sentiment shared by 1 in 4 people across the UK and by a third of those 65 and over. Because a lot of these ones here, it's crazy. It really is crazy. Capital gain tax and the stamp duty do stop a lot of people moving. And there was people who had hopes that the stamp duty tax was going to be reformed. It was going to go the other way, and what they had was a slap in the face, of course, and it actually went higher instead of reforming and making it easier for people to move. So a targeted downsizing incentive would have been a forward-thinking approach, encouraging older homeowners to move to small homes without incurring tax burdens. So we do, however, welcome Chancellor's decision to have capital gains tax on residential property and buy-to-let properties unchanged. Yes. Listen, I wanted to see if there are any other questions before we wrap up, but I hope that this has been helpful. And what we have here is HB, we're not only taxed to move, we're taxed to death. Literally. Yes, we do. There was an interesting TikTok someone sent me across, and it was we tax. We we poo, we tax, we move, we tax, we sell, we tax, we buy, we tax, we rent, we tax, and yes, absolutely. But the question is it any different anywhere else across the globe? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Give me a shout. Let me know if it is. If it's not, I don't know. So, is there a shift in buyer interest towards specific property types, like smaller units or more affordable properties? It depends. I mean, this channel is more specifically towards buy to let. The biggest shift that I have seen is people in the south diversifying into the north. And again, I need to be very clear on this. They're not selling up to go to the north. They're just diversifying, which is a completely different point. And the reality, guys, is this: that buy to let, as much as people don't like, especially renters, and I get it because I do believe there should be changes within the rental sector. I don't believe that rental prices increasing at double digits is sustainable. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's good business for anyone, for any stakeholder in the industry. Yet, interest towards like smaller affordable properties, yet the buy to let needs to be looked at as a business. It is a business, and the only way that you're going to make money, and let's face it, buy to let investors are not a charity. They're not in it for making, they're in it to make money, of course, and a lot of them have, in fact, they're in it for a pension pot. That's it. They're happy to have this as a pension pot, which is completely understandable. So to answer your question, Jonathan, yeah, there has been a shift in buying specific property, and those properties are kind of more on the lower side of things, where that entry, especially with those landlords who are just entering to the industry, just allows them to look at properties that are sort of around £250,000. Where do you get these type of properties, or 200? It will be up north, so there is a shift in seeing that. But those who can afford the capital, they prefer to stay in the city, and they do continue to stay in the city because what they're looking is at that long-term growth in comparison to any other parts of the country. And I see that again and again and again. Those London-based buy-to-let investors, they're staying in the capital. I hope that helps, Jonathan. And you have another here. What type of tenant is currently in high demand in London? Are there groups I could target to maximize rental income? I've seen a huge shift towards short lets. So yeah, if you want to find out more about that, feel free to reach out. Of course, student lets, HMOs, that's really how you're going to maximize on these properties. But you will need to have the right strategy for that. And I don't know many landlords who want to take that upon themselves, and they usually look for professional help, consultants to be able to guide them through that. So I hope that helps in terms of maximizing your rental income, and then the condition of the property, of course. Okay, so there was one more article which I'm going to share with you guys as I wrap up for the evening, and that is what's happened in the last couple of weeks, specifically, or not even a couple of weeks to be honest with you, but last few days, where it has led to renegotiating prices. And I think these are the people who has impacted the most. Now, has this discouraged a lot of buy-to-let investors? I'm going to say no. Has it discouraged some small-time casual landlords or buy-to-let investors? Yes, of course it does. Of course it does. And it's especially annoying for those who had properties in the pipeline. Specifically, it's very annoying to them. Imagine, you have made your numbers work, you're buying a property, you're about to exchange it complete, and then suddenly you're, having to find an extra £5,000 or £7,000. Dare I say even more? it's not something that you would expect. And a lot of these buyers have had to go back to the sellers and say, well, actually, we're going to have to renegotiate. I wasn't expecting this and I don't have any money to pull out. So, we're going to have to come back to the table. So, stamp duty hike leading to renegotiating prices on buy-to-let. A leading agent says stamp duty hike on additional homes from 3 to 5% announced. Budget triggered renegotiation. Jeremy Lee for North London agents worries about worries about the budget did create some uncertainty amongst our buyers and sellers, but many pressed at the pause and rather than the stop button. The underlying feeling is that interest rates will remain fairly stable or even drop a bit over coming months, which has underpinned confidence and activity. The increase in stamp duty for second home buyers and landlords have resulted in some renegotiation of previously agreed prices, but any small dip has been outweighed by new interest from first-time buyers. From new interest from first-time buyers keen to take advantage of competitively priced property becoming available and their own stamp duty changes next spring. So I hope you got the gist of this. So the increase in stamp duty for second home buyers and landlord have resulted in some renegotiated previously agreed prices, but any small dip has been outweighed by new interest from first-time buyers keen to take advantage of competitively priced property becoming available and their own stamp duty changes next spring. So what we're saying is, Labour has somewhat given an advantage to first-time buyers, but it seems to be a very small window of opportunity before the first-time buyers are also having to take an hit and impact on this. So it's, I'd love to find out your opinion on that. So wealth management service. So it says that stamp duty rise is also set to damage the tenant with rent rises as a result of too few investors choosing to buy. So of course, what we're talking about here is that supply and demand dynamic. So of course, if at the moment there is a lack of stock on the market, then what we're saying is this is going to put off some segment of the market. And again, I believe that this small-time casual buyer, which makes up a certain amount of buyers, of course, makes up a certain amount of landlords who are supplying properties into the market. Now, if that supply suddenly goes down and first-time buyers are now having it more challenging to get on the market because after the budget announcement, the interest rates actually are not going to go down at least at the speed that a lot of the market expected it to. And in fact, if anything, it's affected inflation and affected those mortgage rates. Then those first-time buyers, also the stamp duty is also increasing. Then there's going to be less people getting onto the property market, which means, of course, the demand goes up. So you've got this demand going up for rental properties because of the impact of the budget, and you got the supply going down. So demand going up and supply going down because, again, you get less buyers buying those buy-to-let properties and less stock available. So supply and demand, it's just, cause and effect, unintended consequences, and therefore those rents are to continue to increase. At least that's the speculation at the moment, and it makes sense when you look at it from this point of view. So government new 5% stamp duty surcharge on second marks is a bold move to curb demand for buy-to-let investors and second home buyers. The policy aims to make primary home ownership more accessible. However, with buy-to-let investors potentially being priced out, rental supply may tighten further, especially in already competitive urban areas, adding fuel to the rental price surge. That's much better articulated than what I just shared with you. But there you have it, reinforced. They were making their comments in response to the latest index from Halifax, which says average UK house prices nudged up 0.2% in October. This brought an annual growth rate of 3.9%, slightly lower in September. Average property price reached a record high of £293,000. So Mortgage at Halifax says that house prices have reached these heights again in the current economic climate may come as a surprise to many, but perhaps more noteworthy is that they didn't fall very far from the first place. Despite the headwind of higher interest rate, house prices have mostly leveled off over the past 2.5 years. That's significant slowdown compared to 21% rise we saw the equivalent period from January 2020 to the summer of 2022. So again, I'll repeat that this is a significant slowdown compared to a 21% rise we saw in the equivalent period from 2020 to 2022. Of course, we saw what we saw in that period was what was it? A race for space, which was, of course, when the lockdown came to an end, the doors were opened, people started to travel, people wanted to change their lifestyle or their living spaces. They now had sort of more flexibility, maybe valued different things, and had an impact on how people wanted to live, of course. So when we look at it from that perspective, it is a huge slowdown in comparison to that 21% rise. So despite affordability challenge, market activity has been improving. The number of new mortgages agreed recently reached its highest level of 2 years. This aligns with average mortgage rates dropping steadily since spring, now over 160 basis points lower than in summer 2023. So, of course, guys, we do have a lower mortgage rate right now. A lot of people will say, well, yeah, it's lower, but, it's nothing compared to pre-2020. And the reality is we had cheap money. We had a good run. I think it was 10 years or somewhat. People thought that was going to last forever. Are we going to ever see those type of interest rates? I'm not sure. I would say yes, but I think it's going to be a long time. So people just need to find out that this is going to be the new norm, and perhaps sort of, around about 3%. If we're anywhere near that, somewhere in 2025 or 2026, I think that's going to be a good outcome for many people, especially when we're talking about residential for buy-to-let. I tell you what, leave me a comment. Let me know what would be a good outcome for buy-to-let. And so I'm going to wrap up with a few questions here. So Ali, hi, Danny. I want to buy a limited company, buy-to-let. Should I wait a few months, or is it a good time now? A good time. I want to buy a limited company, buy-to-let. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by buy a limited company. So you want to buy a limited company that already has buy-to-let properties in their portfolio, or you want to build a buy-to-let portfolio with a limited company? I think either right now would be a good time. I would say, Ali, yes. So, guys, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope I've been able to shed some light onto the main article of today, which, of course, was landlords rush to sell before Christmas ahead of the stamp duty land tax increase. Have a good evening. Stay safe. And until next Wednesday live. And just make sure you subscribe to the channel so you keep up to date. Thank you so much, guys.